Thank you. I was struggling with that. Okay, now that we know I'm going, and welcome everyone. Thank you for attending our presentation. My name is Toni Hale. I am an assistant professor of social work at Northeastern State University in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And I'm presenting with Dr. Kearney. Do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Kerri Kearney, and I am a higher education faculty member at Oklahoma State University.
Thank you. Okay, we are here today to present some research that we've been working on for longer than I care to admit on youth that experienced foster care and completed college. And so I would ask that if you had any questions or comments throughout, we're a small group, so if you just want to chime in, feel free, or you can put it in the chat box, and Dr. Kearney will be assisting me with that. So the first thing that I wanted to, I wasn't sure about the audience, so I just wanted to provide an overview on the evolution of foster care in the United States and talk a little bit about what that looks like. I think there was another slide. I may have sent you the wrong one, Dr. Kearney. I resent a second one, and I apologize for that. It was last minute. Anyway, historically, foster care in the United States started out as, and I'm not sure how well versed the audience is on foster care, so feel free to chime in. Started out with the earlier approaches that were based on the Elizabethan Poor Laws, the parens patriae concept, which essentially meant that as a state, you're responsible for the citizens that reside in your state. We saw that evolve a little bit. And again, I'm not focusing on child welfare as a whole. I'm specifically focusing on foster care and trying to funnel down into youth that age out of foster care, since that is our research topic. Moving forward, the Children's Aid Society established, Dr. Kearney, I think I sent another one on email just a few minutes ago, and I'm so sorry. If you wouldn't mind pulling that one up, I would appreciate it. I apologize, everyone. I sent a second one to her last minute. Through mid 1850s to early 1900s, the Children's Aid Society established, I don't know if you're familiar with orphan trains, established that as a way to address the needs of youth that did not have, that needed parents. That was pretty controversial and eventually eliminated. After that, we kind of shifted our focus of removing children to restoring families. And that evolved from a substitute service of parenting to more of a supplemental service to parenting. As a reason, and I'm moving through this pretty quick because I do want to pay close attention to the participants of our study and really focus on their stories. So if you have any questions, I would love to speak with you about that after the presentation. But late 50s, early 60s, there was a study that focused on the effects of long-term placement in foster care for youth. And so that really shifted gears from just meeting the basic needs of children and focusing more on permanency for children in foster care. Another shift in gears with the way that we focused on foster care and child abuse and neglect was the establishment of the battered child syndrome in the 1960s that really legitimized the effects of physical abuse long-term, and it also created mandatory reporting laws. And so as a result of that, that being legitimized and mandatory reporting, our system started to see an influx of children involved in our foster care system. So as a result of that happening in the 80s or so, in the 90s, policy started to shift gears a lot and really hone in on permanency and what that looked like for children involved in the foster care system. Again, the overarching goals of the child welfare system, and I'm speaking strictly to states, I'm not speaking about tribal child welfare at this point or focusing on that. That's a whole other presentation. But started to, back to what I was saying, the overall goals of our child welfare system, as we know them now, are to create safety, permanency, and well-being for the kids involved in our care. Just to speak a little further on permanency for children involved in the child welfare system is established through reunification. So in that regard, if you had children involved in the system, in the child welfare system, and the parents completed their treatment plan, whatever that looked like, the children would be reunified with their parents. For the population that we're focusing on, reunification was not established. Secondly, adoption. So children that were adopted in foster care. Again, for the participants in our study, that was not achieved as well. And also there's kinship placement, where children are placed with relatives. So again, I just want to reiterate that for the purposes of our research, our participants did not achieve any type of permanency, resulting in them aging out of care. And I just included these terms just in case. I don't know what your level of familiarity is with foster care, but foster care is, and there's just the definition as to what that constitutes. In our research, we refer to our participants as youth formerly in foster care. You'll see that referenced as with different titles, but that is what we'll be referring to these participants as, youth formerly in foster care. So these are adults who, as minors, were removed from their home because of situations of abuse and or neglect. And then lastly, I'll refer to our participants as aging out of care. And again, that's just an informal term that we use for youth that are no longer dependents of the state and turn 18 years of age without establishing that permanency that I just spoke of. Okay. And I just spoke briefly about the evolution of foster care. To go a little bit further in terms of policy that affects youth in foster care, that age out, in response to the influx of children involved in the foster care system who did not achieve permanency, policy responded with the Adoption Safe Families Act in 1997, and that was with the intention of improving, reducing the number of time spent in care, because we did start to see research regarding the effects of spending a long time in the foster care system. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those long-term implications are, especially when we talk about the participants of this study. And then secondly, in 1999, the Foster Care Independence Act, which really focused on this particular group that you're seeing the slide about now, and that's youth aging out of foster care. Excuse me. This is nationally what was happening in 2018. We had 19,954 youth that aged out of our foster care system. Again, they didn't achieve any permanency, reunification, or kinship placement. They essentially turned 18 and were an adult, so on their own, independent. In the state of Oklahoma, which is what this research focuses specifically on, for 2018, we had 255 young people that aged out of foster care. I do want to say that I'm going to touch on relevant literature in these particular sections. And I'll start with the policy that specifically addresses, or was the beginning of addressing, needs of youth that age out of care. And that was the Foster Care Independence Act of 1999. It provided funding for those youth that turned 18 years of age, and to ensure that they had some sort of continuity of services as they transition into adulthood. This provided funding for college, and when I say ETV, that's referring to educational training vouchers. We'll touch on that in a minute. I should have established that acronym early on, and if I say an acronym and you're not sure what it is, please feel free to remind me that I need to revisit that. Um, the Foster Care Independence Act, the John Chafee Foster Care Independence Act, also provided oversight for the state as these youth transition into adulthood. Um, just as you would with a parent. I don't know how many of you turned 18 and went out into the world and knew everything you needed to know and never had to go back home or rely on your family at all. I did not. I was one of those that turned 18, went out on my own, and then thought, okay, well, maybe I don't know everything. I do still need support from my family. And so providing oversight to ensure that there's some level of support for these youth that are aging out of care. Um, let's see, I'm going to speak to the literature briefly. And again, I have all these resources and references at the end, and can also would be more than happy to send them along or have a discussion for anyone that wanted to speak more about this. But we go back one, Dr. Kearney. Thank you. The first one that I put was foundational study. Obviously, I spoke to a foundational study in 1959. However, this was a study that was conducted in 2007. It was called its reference is the Midwestern study. And to me, based when I started researching and looking at the youth that we are working with now, that's the foundational study, because it really illustrated some of the social problems that youth that age out of foster care contend with. Um, and youth with foster care experience. So some of the literature speaks to that population as a collective. My research focuses specifically on youth that age out of care, which aligns with the Midwestern study. But they speak to the high levels of homelessness, and more specifically, that was about a quarter of the youth that were aging out. And again, you'll see different numbers, but about a quarter of the youth that were aging out of foster care experienced homelessness. 79% have sought treatment for some sort of mental health, substance abuse issues. Becoming parents at an early age, single parenting was another issue that we saw. High levels of incarceration. Being dependent on public assistance. So coming out of a system that they were a part of for so long and aging out, and then finding themselves yet again reliant on that same system to meet their basic needs. I spoke briefly about the policies that were developed to assist this particular population. I do want to touch briefly on, and we'll revisit the campus initiatives. And when I speak about campus initiatives, nationally, we have seen states start to implement programming specific to their campus to service, support, education, and just provide a space to meet the needs of youth that age out of foster care, or I'm not going to say former foster youth, foster students with foster care experience, okay, SEFC, to meet the needs of those populations, to help with retention and persistence and completion of college. And then I'll speak briefly about self-determination theory as we go through the cases in this study. Okay, so the two questions that guided this study is a qualitative multi-case study. What did the individuals that completed a bachelor's degree from the state of Oklahoma, and it was a four-year state institution, what did they perceive as contributing to their ability to persist and complete college? The reason that was important is, as I was looking at kind of floundering in my research or area of interest, I found a little bit of a discrepancy between the Independent Living Act and then the outcomes for youth that age out of foster care. As a person with a social work background pursuing a degree in education, it was a way to combine both of my interests, but finding this discrepancy, the numbers they really blew my mind. 3 to 11% is the range, which is very broad, I know. And I know there are probably more specific numbers. This was from 2017. But for that population, only 3 to 11% that pursued a bachelor's degree. Pardon me?
Excuse me, Mr. Tony, now if 15 minutes pass already, please, in brief, yes, 15 minutes passed.
I'm 15 minutes past my time?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
I think the point is that 15 minutes have elapsed, so there's time to wrap up, maybe is the idea.
Oh, okay. Well, for some reason, I thought it was an hour. Okay, so this was our I am so sorry. I didn't realize I had gone past the time. Would you just go to the findings, Dr. Kearney? I think it's towards the last slide, and I'll briefly touch on those. Those are our participants in the study. They are foster youth that age out of foster care are the most educationally vulnerable groups. And a college degree is the most powerful predictor of successfully emancipating themselves from foster care. We applied self-determination theory to this and found that, and there's such rich stories, I'm sorry that I can't share them all, that they perceive both tangible and intangible support as critical to their abilities to persist. So not just money, but also support. They had this idea that completing college would improve their quality of life and was the main factor in their abilities to persist and complete college. They had a strong desire to make a better life, not just for themselves, but also for others. So you'll see that a lot of them were in helping professions and pursuing that. But they were also very cautious about how they accessed both formal and informal support. But once they did it, the way that they approached it was very strategic, and they were very proactive, serving as their own advocates. So I apologize for the misunderstanding, and I thank you all so much for your time, and I look forward to the next presentation. Thank you.